You walk into the local garden center early in May, and the first thing that hits you is the wall of sound, the hum of the ventilation, the chatter of folks standing in line, and that sharp chemical smell wafting from the rows of bright plastic jugs. Every shelf is loaded down with promises. There are colorful bottles that claim to clear your paths with one spray, heavy bags of granules meant to keep the soil clean, and rows of expensive brand-new tools designed to pop a weed out by its roots without bending your back. People stand there, lifting $40 jugs, turning them over, reading the fine print, and pulling out their wallets. We have been taught that a clean garden is something you must buy, one expensive treatment at a time, season after season. We pour our hard-earned money into those plastic handles, carry them home like ammunition, and go to war against the earth. But if you step away from the concrete aisles and walk down the gravel road a bit, past the bend where the old oak stands, you will find a different kind of ground. There is a garden down the way from a neighbor of mine, an old woman who has tended that plot for 30 years. And in all that time, you will not find a single weed in it. Not a one. Clean soil between every row, paths without a blade of grass in the cracks, beds like something out of a picture book all season long. For years, I told myself she was just lucky, or had special soil, or spent every waking hour out there on her knees, working herself to the bone while the rest of the world slept. I pictured her out there at dawn, pulling and sweating. But one day, I finally swallowed my pride, walked over to her fence, and asked her how she does it. And what she told me was so simple and so cheap that I near laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had spent years fighting weeds the hard way, spending good money on store-bought answers, while the real solution sat in a dark corner of a cupboard in my own kitchen the whole time. Today, I am going to give you her whole secret. I am Elias, and I have gardened this Lancaster County ground my whole life. And I will tell you, weeds are the one war that never ends. From March clear to November, every gardener is fighting it. And here is the thing my neighbor understood that most folks never do. Her secret is not really one magic spray that kills every weed dead forever. It is two parts working together, a cheap, homemade spray to knock down the weeds that are there, and then, far more important, a way to keep new ones from ever coming up. It is that second part, the preventing, that is the real secret. The thing that keeps her garden clean all season long. Stop and think about how we usually handle this. We see a green shoot breaking through our gravel path, or pushing up between our cabbages, and our first instinct is to fight. We react. Let me tell you a thing my grandfather understood about weeds that took me years to learn for myself. He never seemed to fight weeds the way I did. Frantic and behind, on my knees all summer losing the battle. His garden was clean and he was never out there battling it. As a boy, I could not understand how. The answer, I see now, was that he did not fight weeds. He prevented them. He kept the ground covered. He kept ahead of it. He never let it get away from him in the first place. He used to say that a weed pulled is a weed you will pull again. But a weed never given a chance to sprout is a weed gone for good. It took me half my life and a neighbor's reminding to truly understand what he meant. That the whole secret is in the preventing, not the fighting. That is the spirit of everything I am about to give you. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses. There is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book at eliasudar.com. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again, but first, let me be straight with you about why the things most folks try do not work, so you understand what we are doing. Hand pulling means hours on your knees with a sore back. And a week later, it is all back as if you never touched it, because the root broke off deep in the dark and grew again. The harsh chemical weed killers from the store, the strong stuff. Yes, they work, but I do not care to use them, for they harm the very life in the soil, the little creatures and fungi and bacteria that make your garden grow at all. And I would rather not pour something I cannot pronounce onto ground I mean to eat from. And the homemade tries, the plain vinegar or the boiling water, they burn the tops of the weed but leave the root alive, so it comes right back. And salt, well, salt kills a weed, sure enough, but it also poisons that patch of ground. For years, nothing will grow there. So salt is no answer at all. It is surrender. I say this plainly because folks hear that salt kills weeds and go pour it about, and then wonder why nothing will grow in that spot for 2 or 3 years after. Salt does not wash out and break down the way our soda does. It lingers in the ground and sours it for a long, long time, so that you have not cleared a weed patch. You have made a dead patch where not even your good plants will grow. Never put salt where you ever mean to grow anything again. Our baking soda, by contrast, breaks down in the soil before long, and rain washes it through. So used in sensible amounts, it does no such lasting harm. That is a chief reason the soda is the better choice. We want something cheap and safe that does better than all of those. And that is what my neighbor gave me. Here is her recipe, and it costs us pennies, made of things you likely have in the house this minute. Into a good bit of hot water, not boiling, but hot enough to steam. You stir a generous amount of plain baking soda until it completely dissolves, turning the water into a clear, heavy liquid. Then you add a spoonful of plain dish soap and a couple spoonfuls of ordinary vinegar and stir it gentle. That is your spray. Each part does its work. The baking soda is the heart of it, for it is strongly alkaline, and most weeds want a sour, acid sort of ground. Understand this. When you coat the leaves in that alkaline soda, it burns and dries the leaf, drawing the water right out of the cells. The vinegar helps the soda cut through the waxy coat on the leaf so it can do its work. And the dish soap is the clever part, for it breaks the water's tendency to bead up and run off. Instead of rolling off onto the ground, the spray spreads in a thin film over the whole leaf and clings there, white and soapy, staying right where the damage needs to be done. Mix it fresh each time you mean to use it, for it weakens sitting around. Now, here I must be honest with you, more honest than some who sell this idea, because I will not promise you what it cannot do. This spray works wonderfully on the young weeds, the annual weeds, the grass and seedlings in your paths and cracks, burning them down clean. On those, it is a fine and near complete kill. But on the tough old perennial weeds, the ones with the deep tap roots like the dandelion that goes down a foot or more, or the bindweed whose root can go down several feet into the clay, one spraying will not kill the whole root. It burns the top down, and that weakens the plant. But those deep, tough roots have reserves and will send up new shoots. For those stubborn ones, you must have patience. Let me show you exactly what happens when this white liquid touches a stubborn weed, how the leaves begin to change, and how we apply it so it never touches your good crops. When you take that freshly mixed liquid out into the yard, the first thing you notice is the smell. Not the biting, toxic chemical reek of a store-bought jug that makes you hold your breath, but the sharp, clean scent of household vinegar softened by the mild, clean aroma of dish soap. If you have mixed it right, the water should feel slightly slippery between your fingers, thick with dissolved soda, and it will have a faint milky cloudiness to it. It looks gentle, like something you would use to wash a countertop, but to a weed, it is a devastating drying agent. To apply it properly, you need a simple plastic pump sprayer, the kind with a wand that lets you get right down close to the ground. Before you pour the liquid in, make sure you pass it through a fine kitchen strainer or a piece of cheesecloth. This is the first place where beginners trip themselves up. If there are any tiny, undissolved grains of baking soda left swirling in your bucket, they will clog the tiny orifice of your spray nozzle within 3 minutes, and you will spend your morning frustrated, poking at the tip with a needle instead of clearing your paths. Strain it clean, screw the top on tight, and pump it up until the handle offers a firm, resisting push. Now, step up to a weed, say, a young dandelion pushing its way through a crack in your flagstone path. Hold the nozzle just 3 or 4 inches from the leaves and give the trigger a steady squeeze. You do not want a wide, misty fog that floats away on the breeze. You want a coarse, heavy stream of droplets. As the spray hits the green surface, watch closely. If you put enough dish soap in, the liquid will not bead up into little balls and roll harmlessly off into the dirt. Instead, you will see it instantly flatten out, coating the leaf in a glistening, wet sheen that clings to every ridge and vein. Within an hour of hitting the leaf, the magic begins, and it is a quiet, chemical reaction you can watch with your own eyes. The leaf will start to lose its bright, vibrant green, turning a dark, bruised, water-soaked olive color. By the next morning, that olive turns to a crisp charcoal black. The baking soda is literally pulling the moisture out of the plant's cells, collapsing them from the inside out. Touch the leaf then, and it will crumble like dry paper under your thumb. But as we do this, you must keep your wits about you and remember the absolute law of this spray. It does not possess a brain. It cannot tell the difference between a stubborn thistle and the prized heirloom tomato plant you spent 6 weeks nurturing on your windowsill. It will kill any green cell it drenching. If you are working in your gravel paths or along a brick driveway, you can swing the wand freely. But the moment you move near your vegetable beds or your flower borders, your movement must become slow, deliberate, and careful. This brings us to the second major mistake folks make when they first get their hands on this recipe. They get excited by how well it works on the driveway, walk over to their garden beds, and start spraying wildly at weeds growing right at the base of their pepper plants. A stray mist carries in the wind, settles on the lower leaves of the crop, and 3 days later, half their harvest is ruined. When you must dispatch a weed that is standing shoulder to shoulder with your good plants, you change your tactic entirely. Do not use the pump sprayer there. Instead, carry a small glass jar of the mixture and an ordinary 1-inch paintbrush out to the bed. Dip the bristles into the liquid, wipe off the excess against the rim, and carefully paint the solution directly onto the leaves of the weed, top and bottom. It takes a few extra seconds, but it ensures the soda stays exactly where it belongs, leaving your crops untouched. If you do use the sprayer near a border, always carry a square piece of stiff cardboard in your left hand. Hold that cardboard down firmly as a shield, blocking your good plants completely, while your right hand directs the spray wand onto the weed behind it. Understand this, too. The timing of your walk through the garden matters just as much as the ingredients in your bucket. You must look at the sky before you spray. The ideal moment is late in the afternoon, just as the sun is dipping below the tree line and the heavy heat of the day begins to break. But before the evening dew starts to settle on the grass, if you spray at high noon under a blazing July sun, the intense heat will evaporate the water in your mixture within 10 minutes, leaving nothing but a dry, white crust of baking soda sitting harmlessly on top of the leaf. The soda needs to be wet and in solution to break down the waxy cuticle and penetrate the plant's skin. By spraying in the cool of the evening, the liquid stays wet, active, and working on the leaf for 8 or 10 hours through the dark night. Furthermore, you must check the horizon for rain. If a summer thunderstorm rolls through 3 hours after you spray, your hard work will be washed straight down into the dirt before the soda has finished its job, completely wasting your pennies and your time. You want a clear, dry window of at least 24 hours. When you walk out the morning after a proper spraying, your paths will look transformed. The small annual weeds, the crabgrass seedlings, the chickweed, and the clover will be completely cooked, turned to black, withered ribbons that you can easily sweep away with a stiff broom. But when you look closely at the old, deep-rooted perennials, the ones we talked about earlier, like the buckhorn plantain or the Canada thistle, you will see a different story. The outer leaves will be black and dead, yes, but the very center heart of the plant might still show a stubborn speck of green. Do not let that discourage you, and do not think the mixture has failed. That is simply the underground root using its hidden pantry of stored all starch to fight back, pushing up a fresh green tongue to replace what you burned off. This is the exact moment where the lazy gardener gives up and says the home remedy does not work. But a master practitioner knows this is just the beginning of the second act. Leave that stubborn survivor alone for 5 or 6 days. Let it spend more of its valuable underground energy drawing up that new growth. Then, exactly 1 week after your first application, pump up your sprayer again, walk down the same path, and hit that new green center a second time. You are bleeding its cellar dry. By the 3rd week, the root will have nothing left to give, its reserves completely exhausted, and it will rot away quietly in the dark soil, never to return. Once your paths and borders are cleared of the living enemy, your ground sits bare, clean, and vulnerable. And that bareness is a dangerous thing, for nature abhors an empty space. If you leave that clean soil exposed to the sky and the sun, you have simply prepared a perfect bed for the next 1,000 seeds floating on the wind. To truly win this keeping of the garden, we must move immediately from the knockdown to the shield. We must understand how to lay the blanket that keeps those seeds asleep forever. Now, some folks look at a simple kitchen white powder and a bottle of vinegar and think this is just some old wives' tale, a bit of country magic passed down because people didn't know any better. But there is a beautiful, exact science behind why my neighbor's remedy works so thoroughly, and it has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with balance and with how a plant is built to breathe and drink. Understand this. Every leaf on every weed in your garden is covered in thousands of microscopic mouths called stomata. Think of them like the pores on your own skin when you sweat on a hot July afternoon. These little openings are how the plant breathes in carbon dioxide from the air and lets out moisture. To protect these delicate openings and keep from drying out under the sun, the plant grows a microscopic layer over its leaves, a waxy coat called the cuticle. It is nature's raincoat, designed specifically to make water bead up and slide off so the plant doesn't drown or lose its internal juices. When we mix our spray, we are creating a targeted attack on that very defense system. The vinegar we add is a mild acetic acid. Its only job in this recipe is to act like a sharp knife, cutting right through that waxy, waterproof shield on the leaf. Once the vinegar scratches the surface, it opens the door for the real worker, the baking soda, or what science calls sodium bicarbonate. Baking soda is heavily alkaline, which sits on the exact opposite side of the scale from acid. Most living cells, especially those of soft garden weeds, are filled with a delicate, slightly acidic sap. When that heavily alkaline soda solution forces its way past the waxy coating and enters the leaf cells, it causes an immediate, violent chemical shock. It is an extreme shift in the plant's chemistry that the cells cannot survive. But the real damage happens through a process called osmosis, and you don't need a college degree to understand it. Think of a dry sponge placed next to a spill of water. The sponge greedily sucks the water out of the space around it until the spill is dry. Baking soda acts like a powerful chemical sponge. When it sits in a wet film on the outside of the leaf cell, it aggressively draws the internal water right out through the cell walls to satisfy its own chemical balance. It literally drinks the weed dry from the outside, collapsing the cell walls until the leaf shrivels, turns black, and dies of sudden, localized dehydration. The plant hasn't been poisoned by heavy toxic compounds. It has simply had its plumbing completely reversed. But because I promise to be entirely straight with you, we must talk about the strict limitations of this method. I will not stand here and tell you this replaces every tool or works on every square inch of your property, because it does not. This remedy has sharp boundaries, and if you cross them, you will either be disappointed or you will cause yourself extra work. First, let us talk about the surfaces where you can use it. This soda spray is absolutely perfect for gravel driveways, brick walkways, flagstone paths, and the concrete cracks along your foundation. On these hard, dead surfaces, you can spray thoroughly without a worry. The soda will bake on the stone, dry out the weeds, and eventually be washed away by the rain into the surrounding soil where it dilutes to nothing. However, you must be incredibly cautious if you have paths made of soft, porous limestone or certain types of decorative blue slate. Baking soda is a mild salt compound at its core, and if you drench porous stones with it repeatedly under a hot sun, it can leave faint white rings or efflorescence, a powdery salt crust, that can take months of heavy scrubbing to remove from the stone. It doesn't destroy the path, but it can alter its look if you are reckless with the wand. Second, we must look at the types of weeds themselves, because this method treats different plants very differently. Soft-bodied, broad-leaved annuals, things like chickweed, pigweed, lamb's quarters, and young purslane, have thin, tender skins and weak root systems. One good coating of the soda spray destroys their leaves completely, and because they have no deep root reserves, they die entirely in 48 hours. They are the easy victory. But if you try this spray on mature, established grasses, like thick clumps of orchard grass or deeply rooted quackgrass, you will find it takes much more effort. Grasses are built differently than broadleaf weeds. Their growing point, the crown, is buried just slightly beneath the soil surface, protected by the dense base of the blades. The spray will blacken the tall blades, but it often fails to reach that hidden crown, meaning the grass will push up fresh green spears a week later. For heavy grass clumps in paths, you are far better off using boiling water to cook the underground crown directly, or using a sharp hoe, rather than wasting your soda spray. Furthermore, this method has an absolute seasonal limit. It works beautifully in the spring and early summer when the weeds are young, juicy, and growing rapidly. Their cell walls are thin, and they are pumping water at a high rate, making them incredibly vulnerable to the osmotic draw of the soda. But by late August and September, the surviving weeds have toughened up. They have grown thick, leathery leaves and dense waxy coats to survive the summer drought. If you spray a mature woody weed in the autumn, the soda will barely leave a mark. It will spot the leaves, but it will not kill the plant. At that stage of the year, the old tools, the iron spade and the muscle in your arm, are the only honest answers left. And finally, you must understand the limitation of the soil itself. While baking soda breaks down quickly and is infinitely safer than store-bought chemical jugs, it still contains sodium. If you use this spray in the exact same garden bed week after week, year after year, you will eventually build up the sodium levels in that specific patch of dirt. High sodium tightens the clay, makes the soil hard like brick, and prevents your good vegetable roots from taking up water. That is why my neighbor never uses this as a general blanket spray over her growing beds. It is a precision tool for the edges, the cracks, and the isolated invaders. To keep the actual soil of her vegetable rows clean, she relies on an entirely different discipline: the quiet, powerful physics of the blanket. Let me show you exactly how she prepares that cover, the specific materials she chooses for different crops, and how she lays it so that the light never wakes a single weed seed again. It is a comforting thing to realize that this simple, bubbly mixture of kitchen soda, soap, and vinegar is not a modern invention of the laboratory, nor is it a fly-by-night internet craze. If you dig back through old farm journals and the worn pages of century-old household ledgers, you will find that our ancestors were using these exact chemical properties long before anyone coined the term organic gardening. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, before massive chemical companies began distilling synthetic petrochemical weed killers in giant factories, country folks had to rely entirely on what was already sitting in the pantry or the barn. They understood that the great keys to managing the earth were density, coverage, and the wise use of common alkaline materials like lime, wood ash, and common baking soda. They used what they called soda water washes to clean the moss and creeping weeds out of stone paths. And they knew that a thick blanket of winter straw was the best insurance a man could have against a ruined onion patch in June. Over the years, as modern farming pushed toward the heavy, expensive chemical jugs that promised to clear an acre with a single spray, these quiet local methods were simply cast aside. They weren't forgotten because they stopped working. They were forgotten because you cannot put a high price tag or a corporate patent on a basic box of baking soda and a bale of field straw. But if you look closely at modern research, you will find that the old people were right all along. Today, university agricultural extensions and botanical researchers have put these exact methods under the microscope, and the science confirms what my neighbor has known for 3 decades. If you look at the bulletins from Cornell University's horticultural trials, researchers documented that simple sodium bicarbonate solutions act as a powerful deterrent to plant diseases and a highly effective topical desiccant, meaning it physically dries out the soft green tissues of targeted plants. Further field studies, including those published in agricultural research journals like Weed Technology, have repeatedly demonstrated how high concentrations of sodium bicarbonate effectively suppress weed seed germination and kill broadleaf seedlings by completely disrupting their internal cell fluid balance. The old wisdom isn't a superstition. It is verified, rock-solid science that costs pennies instead of dollars. Understand this. The real strength of this entire system is that it returns the control of your land back into your own 2 hands. It frees you from that endless cycle of standing in the concrete aisles of the garden center, staring at $40 jugs of chemical poison, and wondering if what you are buying is going to sour the very ground that feeds your family. It shows you that with a simple box from your pantry, a bale of clean straw from a local farmer, and a little bit of patient, rhythmic timing, you can achieve a garden that is cleaner, healthier, and more beautiful than anything that comes out of a factory bottle. So, when the next clear evening comes around, and the sun drops low enough to cast long, cool shadows across your yard, I want you to step out onto your paths and look down. Don't look at the weeds as an invading army that you need to fight with frantic anger and an aching back. Look at them with the quiet confidence of someone who understands the balance of the soil. Mix up a batch of this heavy, clear soda liquid in an ordinary bucket. Feel the slippery texture of it between your fingers. Smell that sharp hint of household vinegar, and go out and coat those stubborn path dwellers with a heavy, wet sheen. Watch them turn olive and black by morning, and then, before the bare ground can invite the next generation of invaders, lay down your thick, clean blanket of mulch. Do the work once, do it gently, and do it at the right time. There is a deep, quiet joy in tending a plot of ground this way, knowing that you are keeping your corners clean and your rows fertile, using the same plain, honest methods that kept our grandfathers' gardens green. It is simple, it is cheap, and it belongs to you. Go out and try it on your own ground, and see just how quiet a clean garden can truly be.